Hello everybody, Realm Builder Guy here, and welcome back to another Crusader Kings 3 guide. Today we did five, interesting, fun starts in 1066 and 867. Then I did five more fun starts in 1066, so obviously now I'm going to do 5 more fun starts in 867. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you're new. Also, check out the links in the description to Twitter, to Patreon. I did launch a Patreon page there, as well as the Discord server. Hop in there. Bunch of like-minded people interested in grand strategy games, RPGs, and so on. So feel free to join the community there. So today, I've picked 5... again, that are interesting for a variety of reasons and a variety of difficulty levels. And the first one, well, he's not going to be unknown, but maybe his story is. I mean, a lot of people talk about this individual being kind of an OP start in 867, even though in the last major patch, Paradox did kind of calm his power down a little bit. But as far as who he was historically, as you know, that's something I like to do. We're going to dive a little bit in there. So let's go check out this individual. So we find ourselves in the western coast of France, south of Brittany. And of course, it is Count Heston of Montague. Very, very famous for being very, very OP in CK2 and CK3. You can see he's got 3,000 soldiers, or over 3,200. 3,000 are the special soldiers now. Just as a note, special soldiers, as a Viking, you lose those. Well, they don't replenish, so beware. Count Heston. You may or may not know him. He was featured, also his character was featured in, or is featured in The Last Kingdom on Netflix. I really don't care much for how they decided to portray Heston there as one of the more loathsome characters, kind of a coward and traitor and constantly changing. Heston was known for being cunning and ruthless and cruel, which is kind of a apropos for a lot of Vikings at the time, at least how they were described by those they conquered, but he was never seen as a coward, and you can make the case for Heston in The Last Kingdom to be a complete coward. I actually hate the guy and was always hoping he would die soon. But anyway, let's talk about Heston himself historically. Now, Heston was a legendary Viking leader and did exist. One of the legends around him is that he was part of the leadership team for the raiding expedition with Bjorn Ironside into the Mediterranean and North Africa, which is depicted in Vikings, but Heston is not in that one for whatever reason. It's all, Hollywood does what Hollywood does, right? So anyway, he then went to France and decided to raid France. And we're going to talk again about the TV show Vikings, because legend has it that Heston faked dying, or he said he was dying, and that he wanted to convert to Christianity to gain entry into the city of Luna when they were actually in Italy, and he thought it was Rome. But anyway, and then once they brought him into the church, he jumped from the stretcher and led the sacking of the town from the inside. The other legend is that he actually faked being dead and came out of his coffin to do it, which is something shown that Ragnar Lothbrok did in Paris in the show Vikings, but it was actually rumored that it was Heston who did that and not Ragnar Lothbrok, and Heston did it in Italy and not in France. But he finally settled in Brittany and actually allied with the neighbors here in Brittany. King Solomon was his ally, even though it doesn't show it here. But he wasn't there for very, very long. He came there in the 1880s, in the 880s, and then left France in 892 for England. In fact, he landed in England, and this is where, again, the show Last Kingdom comes true. Heston did come to England, and he actually warred mainly with Mercia and Wessex for control of East Anglia. At one point, his sons, he had two, even though here he only has one, but his sons were taken as hostages by Alfred the Great and then baptized, and Alfred the Great actually became the godfather to Heston's eldest son. So kind of interesting there. So there was constantly battling with Wessex and Mercia, but he never really staked a major foothold in England, and then he kind of faded from history in 896. There's no other reference to him at that point, but at that point, if you think about it, that's about 30 years from now, so he'd be 81 exactly. So he was an old man at that point. He was already not a young guy when he actually came to England in 892. So that's Heston, the historical factor now, or the figure in history. But what are you going to do with him here? Well, there are a few things you can do. You can take on West Francia. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Or you can turn here against Brittany. Now, you have the superior force over King Solomon of Brittany. So you can bring that superior force to bear with those special troops. You're also a Viking raider, so that helps you. You're quick, cautious leader, brilliant strategist. All of this, he's also lustful, so, his wife is a lot younger, so maybe he can pop out a few more kids here, produce a few more heirs instead of just the one, who also is already quick, because, of course, it's a congenital, it's a trait that gets passed on. He has no claims. He has a ton of prestige. He's exalted amongst men. He's got a lot of gold. Piety not so much, but a ton of soldiers. So Brittany is honestly the most logical step to try to conquer them. Maybe betroth your son to somebody, maybe another Viking lord to come in and help you in the conquest of Brittany. And from Brittany, maybe look at landing in England. I wouldn't worry about West Francia too much at this point. Kind of play it by ear. See how this whole nightmare border gore of the Carlings progresses before you decide to go after West Francian holdings. Brittany is the most logical step. Brittany and Lyon. Go in there before they ally. Like I said, maybe look for an ally for yourself, and then kind of take it from there. Moving to England historically would be accurate, and it would be kind of interesting. As, highlighting this in my 867 Britain guide, you've got Ivar as well as Halfdan here that are warring already. So you have a destabilized British Isles, and that may not be bad for a conquest from the south, maybe looking at Cornwall or the south coast of Wessex, or maybe going into Wales. So that is Heston of Montague. Next up, we go to West Francia on the border to Lotharingia and Count Eckhard of Chalon of House Nibelunging. All right, so this is a completely fictitious character. This is a fictitious house, but it is a famous name, and that's why I picked this one, just because it's interesting. Now, he doesn't have, he's got pretty decent, prestige, not a lot of gold. He's not an extraordinarily great character to play with. Military strength is okay. I'd say it's, on average, it's a little bit less than some of your neighbors, except for maybe Dijon, or Bourbon is a little bit more. But beside that, it's actually about the name. So Nibelung. So what I'm going to tell you about the Nibelung is actually the Nibelung comes from the German poem, the Nibelungenlied, written around the year 1200, author unknown. The original document still exists, which makes it really, really fascinating. It's based on the oral tradition and mythology of events in basically this area of Germany, on the Rhine River Valley, from around the 5th century and even trickling into the 6th century, but really at the middle part of the 5th century. And it revolves around the epic hero Siegfried and the original Burgundian kingdom that sprung up here. Now, the original Burgundian kingdom was destroyed by two entities, the Huns and the Western Roman Empire in, I believe it was the late 5th century. So that original Burgundian kingdom fell apart. But Siegfried was killed eventually. He slew the dragon, which modern scholars believe that the dragon in Siegfried was more symbolic. It actually referred to Arminius defeating the Roman legions in the Teutoburger forest. But anyway, so Siegfried kills the dragon. He marries a woman from the Burgundian house called Kriemhild. So after Siegfried dies, Kriemhild then has to marry Etzel. Now, Etzel is Old German for Attila. So she married Attila the Hun. What's interesting there is the legend has that Attila, who died mysteriously, the death was blamed on his new Germanic wife. I forget her exact name. It was Hilde something, but they think that Kriemhild and Hilde kind of together. So that's the story, that actually Kriemhild killed Attila for the Huns destroying the Burgundian kingdom. So that's where that all falls into, and that's where Nibelungen comes from. It doesn't really exist. There was no dynasty of Nibelungen, especially not here in the 9th century. Paradox had this in there in CK2. I love the fact that they kind of brought it in. There are quite a few of fictitious houses so as to and people to populate the map. This is one of them. But the interesting thing here is what would be my goal if I was taking over these guys, and maybe I will. If you take over these guys, is maybe to build an old Burgundian kingdom back. Now, it's going to be very, very difficult because you're not overly powerful. You're already 65. Your half-brother, is the heir. You have no children and no spouse. That's a very, very tough start. You have no claims. It's tough, but it could be a really fun thing to say. We're going to rebuild the Burgundian kingdom. Maybe you name a few Siegfrieds and Kriemhilds along the way and kind of stake that out. It's the hardest path probably to get a Burgundian kingdom built, but it's definitely one that I find just interesting. Just interesting. So those are, you can create your own Nibelungenlied saga. Number 3 is someone who did exist in a house that definitely existed for centuries, and it is High Chieftain, Duke, Siemowit of Greater Poland of the House Piast. Now, they're obscure at this point, but they would not stay obscure. So Siemowit really isn't, there's not a ton known about him except for that he is the son of Piast the Wheelwright. Now, it is argued that Piast founded the Piast dynasty, but Siemowit was actually the first proper Piast ruler in the dynasty because he was elected to become Duke of the Polands. So here it's obviously High Chieftain because tribal authority and so on. They're a tribal society. They are non-Christian. His great-grandson would actually be the first Christian ruler of Poland, and that was Mieszko I. And, of course, as things do in the Middle Ages, if the king or duke or whoever becomes Christian, then all of his subjects have to become Christian as well. So that led to the Christianization of Poland. Now, the Piasts ruled Poland as dukes and kings until 1370. So you're looking at, about 500 years of Polish rule. They finally unified Poland, but then the death of Casimir the Great ended their reign as the king's dynasty of Poland. But they actually had a Silesian branch that ruled in Silesia, so down here, until 1675. So that's the history. Now, you come into this in a very interesting place here. So you have a lot of other non-Christians right around you. Probably the most powerful is Lower Silesia, where they have a ton of claims, which is also kind of interesting. You're in Greater Poland. You have no claims. You're over your domain limit. You got a decent amount of prestige, no money, some piety, and 1,000 soldiers. So you're not bad. A strategist and a forder, pretty good martial skills. I've loaded this a couple times, and he retains those. So what do? Well, it's pretty simple. You start creating Poland. You start building Poland. So the first step would be here, go to Chelmno. Take over that one. Take over the Polish culture group there. I mean, if you can conquer the different Polish regions, you can see it all down here, Polish culture, you don't even have to culture convert. You can just slowly but surely take over. And you can see here you've got Pomeranian, here you have Polabian, then you have Prussian, but all of these here are Polish. They're Polish down here. They're Slovenian. So bit by bit, take these over and then take over Silesia. Now, you are 42 years old, but you do have 3 children. So none of them at this point are married, so you can betroth them, get them married, and build some good alliances. It may not be bad to, in the beginning, ally with Silesia because they are powerful and they are your neighbor. He has a ton of claims, but looking more south. Alternatively, talk to Neklan of Bohemia and maybe build an alliance with the Bohemians. Now, keep in mind, you are an unreformed Slavic faith. You are not Christian. The nice thing is a lot of these share your faith. These guys down here don't. But those are all that'll help you in forming the alliances. You are at a ducal level. And looking around here, pretty much everybody is a duchy or a county. So forming those marriage alliances won't be overly difficult. And that way you get a bigger power base. And you can gobble up some of these small ones before you become big enough to take over Silesia. And then maybe turn your eye south, looking at Moravia and Bohemia. But first of all, I would conquer every bit of Polish culture group territory that I can and start building a true Polish kingdom and maybe never convert to Christianity. See how long you can keep that going. Next, we head to Central Asia and to U with the umlaut, and Gyalpo-Tride, the Gyalpo-Tride, Jumchen of U. So, why these guys? Well, it's of the house Pugiel, and Pugiel is actually equals Pugial, which is the term for the Empire of Tibet. So this is the well-known house, level of splendor you can see right here, well-known. This is the inheritance of the Empire of Tibet. Now, the empire actually fell apart after his father, right here, Langdharma, was assassinated by a Buddhist hermit in 842. So you're looking at 25 years before the current start date. And there was a succession civil war between him and his brother over here in the significantly larger realm of Guje, not sure how to pronounce it, but these are the two brothers. Now, if you look at it, he's 27 and he's 25, so they were teeny tiny when their father died, so not quite sure about that historically. But you can see he's got a lot of claims all across the region, but the biggest one is the Empire of Tibet. And it's a press claim, so that gets inherited by children, and they then get it as an unpressed claim. Now, of course, your brother over here has all of the same claims, including the Empire of Tibet. Now, why did I pick U over Guje? Because U, and I just like saying that, is smaller. It's a more difficult start, and I just find that more intriguing personally. If we look at Guje over here, they're a kingdom. U is also a kingdom, but a smaller one. 1,600 soldiers here, 900. We're looking at about the same amount of gold. He has more prestige and more piety. Now, you are of the Tibetan culture code, the Bodpa, and of course, unreformed Tibetan faith. Now, the Bodpa are around you. So, what would you do? I mean, what happened after this? Not much. It just consistently kept on disintegrating after this. So, the Empire of Tibet didn't come back to be under these rulers. But all the Tibetan lands, if we just zoom out here a little bit and click on the claim, there is all of Tibet. That is your claim. Pressed claim at the Empire of Tibet. Now, if you look at everybody that's in there, there are some very powerful players. So you have to play this well. So the first step would be is start looking at some of your neighbors, some that you could maybe quickly conquer directly next to you that are relatively small. And then, of course, after that, looking at who to ally with. Now, you've got 2 children, unmarried, so find a spouse. You're only 25 years old. Pretty average, not going to lie, not a great war hero here with Marshal of 1. He's got pretty good prowess, which is interesting, but that's because he's a base of 2 and he's sadistic and vengeful. Not sure if that carries over, but still. First thing I would do is try to take over this realm here so you can kind of bridge the gap and bring everything together. So the first thing is go after your fellow Botspa cultures, but as far as religion goes, it's looking like you may be the only one here that has that religion right around you. So building the Empire of Tibet would be incredibly interesting. Rebuilding that, it's going to be a long haul. It's not something you're going to be able to do really quickly, but you're going to have to, because you have a press claim, your heirs have unpressed claims, but after that the claim goes away unless you're able to renew it somehow. So first things first, take over, get some good alliances, maybe with some powerful allies just to the south of you. Depends, religion will be an issue, but at least you're at a king level, so that means the level won't be, no one will look at you and go, you're beneath me, but religion could be an issue there. So maybe look at faith conversion eventually as well to bring everybody under this same faith. If you look, they're all Buddhist faith around you for the most part. These guys are not, but for the most part, a lot of them are Buddhist around you. So may consider looking at converting to Buddhism to just make that process a little bit easier. So the Empire of Tibet is number 4. So now let's take a look at number 5, which is going to be also a little bit difficult. So for number 5 on this list, we are going to Sheikh Rostam Kharanzadeh of Mazandaran of the Bavandid dynasty, Zoroastrian. Now, somebody had said, why not do something Zoroastrian? And here we go. Holy warrior and skilled tactician. I've had that in a couple of reloads with this one, so it seems to be carrying over. You've got a decent military strength, not a lot of money, but good prestige and good piety. So what is the history, of course, behind Sheikh Rustam and the Bavandids? So Rustam, as he's historically also known, the first revolted against his Zaidi overlords, his liege, most of his life, and actually in 879 turned against them in open revolt. And he also tried to play internal politics to pit the Zaidis against one another. Unfortunately, that backfired, and he had to flee. He was able to come back to his lands after external mediation. I think it was the Saffarids that helped that process and get him back home. But eventually, the Zaidis said, we don't forget what happened. And they lured him to the capital, where they trapped him, tortured him, and killed him in 896. So that's the story of Rustam. So hopefully you can change that. But the Bavanids, that's the interesting one. They actually ruled this area for about 700 years until the year 1349. Now, the reason why they came here, they originally came from the main parts of Persia, like most Zoroastrians did, but they fled the region after the Muslim conquest of Persia and kind of settled in here. Now, they survived the Mongol conquest, but the last Bavandid king was murdered by the Afrasiab dynasty in 1349. His name was Hassan II, and that ended the Babandids after 700 years of rule. Just kind of sad. So what can you do? Now, first of all, you have some natural allies in Gilan and Gurgan. Now, historically, he also sometimes tried to conquer Gurgan, but these are your Zoroastrian neighbors. And that's really, that's kind of, for the most part, all you have going for you, because the Taravids are also Zoroastrian. Other than that, everybody else is of a different faith. But you could build a Zoroastrian kingdom. Now, the first thing you have to do is become independent. The Alavids only have 771. These guys have 393. So you could declare independence. You are 22 years old. You already have a child. You have a sibling. So the line of succession is guaranteed. But you want to get married. You want to have a few more kids. Build some alliances, and maybe build and marry your kids into these neighboring Zoroastrian realms to build a Zoroastrian kingdom. But of course, to do any of that, you need to become independent. So maybe allying, even though it's going to be very, very hard, with a fellow Persian who may not be Zoroastrian. Alternatively, you turn to Gurgan and Gilan. They're small. They're not going to bring a ton of troops, but if you look at 239 here, 400 here, that's 600 more to add to your 600. That's 1,200. And at that point, you've got overwhelming force over your liege. So that would be the first logical step, is to go along those lines, to be able to declare independence. Historically, Rustam always wanted independence, but of course, wasn't able to achieve that, and at the end that cost him his life. But maybe you can change that history. You've got plenty of room for a spouse and concubines, if you so choose, to build a Zoroastrian kingdom, and maybe bring back the Zoroastrian faith in all of the Persian region. So interesting, very difficult start, I'm not gonna lie. Even though you are of the perfect age and you can get married and you already have some heirs, just the fact that, well, let's scroll out here. The Abbasids are right here. The Tahirids are here. The Saffarids are right here. And your liege isn't exactly powerful. So you have to play these alliance games quite intelligently if you want to remain independent and Zoroastrian. If you decide, hey, let's become Muslim, well, then a ton of stuff is open to you. But if the goal is, and I think that would be the interesting one, to stay Zoroastrian, it's not going to be easy. So there you have it. 5 more interesting and fun starts here in 867. Let me know down in the comments what you think of them. Let me know if you've played as any of them and how you did. Or if you say, hey, I'm going to try one of those, and let me know how it goes. I'm pretty sure there have been a lot of Heston saves or campaigns. Not so sure about some of the other ones, but I'd be very interested to know that. Tibet is one that really, really intrigues me. So, till next time, please don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and check out Discord, Twitter, Patreon down in the description. Links down there. Till next time, I'm Realm Builder Guy, and I will talk to you soon.